Hey everyone, welcome to the College Football Rundown. I'm Woj.
And I'm Wahl.
We're going to start off this week with the juiciest daily fantasy game of the week, Wahl. The Red River Rivalry, Texas, Oklahoma. How about it?
I'm excited for this one. I'm a big Texas fan, big Longhorn. Me and Mr. McConaughey, we're big Longhorns fans. This game every year is on my schedule, on my slate of games I'm going to watch. You know, it's played at the Texas State Fair, Woj. Texas State Fair. There's going to be a lot of people here, and they're going to be excited.
Yeah, the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. The game's at 11 a.m. Central Time on Fox.
Hey, you know how many people are going to be there that are Texas fans, Woj? You know what percentage?
A lot? I don't know. How well does Oklahoma travel, Wahl?
Well, there's going to be 50% of them, Woj. It's pretty easy because they give 50% of the tickets to Texas, 50% of the tickets to Oklahoma, and I'm guessing neither of those fans are selling their ticket to someone else. It's actually real interesting because they divide all the tickets at the 50-yard line. So on one side of the 50-yard line will be the Texas fans. On the other side of the 50-yard line will be the Oklahoma fans, and you'll see it if you watch this game.
That's probably beneficial in some cases. I'm assuming it's a pretty brutal rivalry and a long one at that.
It is. It goes back a long time. Some of you might know it as the shootout, which it actually started as, and they changed it because they didn't want it to be anything gun related. Then it was changed to the Red River Rivalry, which people don't have, easy time saying. So then they just changed it to the showdown, in my opinion. So it's easier to say.
Yeah, Texas is getting 12 in this one, over under at 75. Holy moly. Texas plus 311 on the money line.
Plus 311 on the money line, Woj. That is something to look at right there. I mean, Texas has covered 6 of their last 7 spreads, last year being the exception. Oklahoma was a tough team last year. The average spread in this series, going back the past 7 or 8 years is 12. The average score differential at the end of the game, only 9.5. That means these handicappers are not getting this game right. They're not respecting this rivalry and how close it is, because the teams just come to play no matter who's the better team. You take out Texas, which was a 13.5 point, I should say, you take out Texas's blowout of Oklahoma, which they were a 13.5 point underdog in this game, and they blew out Oklahoma in 2012. You're at an average, score differential of 8. That's crazy, Woj. And right now you got a spread at 12. That's something you got to look at when you're in the, the gambling atmosphere. You need to look at these stats. There's a big difference, between 1 and 2 scores when you look at a spread. For example, this spread's at 12, that's a 2-score spread. If the spread's at 8, that's a 1-score spread. There's a big difference. So I think Texas is something to look at here.
I think the Cappers have tunnel vision. I think their tunnel vision set on one thing. It's called Jalen Hurts.
Oh, you're probably right.
Yeah. But basically, let's just get right into daily fantasy in this game, because this is a juicy game at 75 over under, and the spread being at, like we talked about, Texas plus 12. So in my mini episode 4 we did, when we talked about DraftKings earlier this week, we talked about implied points. So the implied points in this matchup right now is Texas 31.5 and Oklahoma 43.5. That's a lot of points. So that's potential for a big day in DraftKings for these guys. The unfortunate thing is DraftKings has found out, they realized this, and they priced a lot of their guys pretty high. For instance, Jalen Hurts, quarterback for Oklahoma, is at 9,000, which is a little less than what he had been at previously, but there are so many top-tier, high-potential quarterbacks in the afternoon slate of games in DraftKings where I think they had to go back to 9. They had to dial them back a little bit. But 1,500 yards, 14 TDs, 500 yards rushing, 5 TDs rushing. That's just a lot of points. He had an off week last week versus Kansas, Wahl, 36.8 points. That's all he scored. Come on.
Yeah, they were looking rough there at the beginning. Obviously, they turned it on, and so did he at the end.
Yeah, but even for an off week, scoring 36.8 points, that's just nuts. He's just one of those guys that you have to either bite the bullet and take the 9,000 or try to get lucky with somebody else. But in this game especially, I like Jalen Hurts a lot. Another guy you can match up with him in a wide receiver role is Charleston Rambo, and we've talked about Rambo before. He's 6,400. He's the cheaper option at running back this week. He's risky, though, because while they spread the ball around a lot at Oklahoma, 13 receivers last week caught a pass. That's not good for Rambo.
No, and there is no receiver that caught more than two passes, Woj. So maybe he'll get a big one though. Is that what you're thinking?
I mean, that's what you'd have to hope for in that if you're going to pick Rambo. So I'm going to steer clear of Rambo. The guy I'm going to go with, and I'm most impressed with in this matchup at wide receiver, is Devin DuVernay from Texas at 7,400. Still a little expensive, but 53 targets on the season. He's hauled in 45, which is the most out of any wide receiver in this slate of games. Not the most targets, but the most hauls in at 45 on this slate of games. Believe it or not, the most targets is, I think, 62, and that's the Michigan State wide receiver. But we won't be picking him this week as they're playing Wisconsin.
No, stay away from Wisconsin. We're actually, a game we're looking at, Woj, and I'm not real excited about it, but Iowa State, you got to look at them this week, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, one of those teams, we're looking at a 53 over under. Iowa State's giving 10.5, but they've been putting up good numbers, really good numbers, especially Brock Purdy. I mean, if you're not going to take Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy's a good option.
Hey, Brock Purdy's a great option in my opinion. He's passing for 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns in 5 games. Again, I'm not the DraftKings expert, but that seems like that's going to get you some points.
For sure, yeah, and he's a dual threat too. Wall, like he likes to run the ball in. So, and those are the guys you need to, make money in DraftKings.
Hey, I'm looking at the spread in this game though because it kind of makes sense. The line was set low for this one. West Virginia squeaked by Kansas and James Madison, earlier in the season. They lost to a questionable Missouri team, and obviously they lost to Texas. But I'm thinking this is probably a hangover, from Texas game last week, maybe from West Virginia. That's why it's at 10.5. I really don't know, to be honest with you, but it's something that's caught my attention. Kendall for West Virginia, he threw 4 interceptions last game. And if it happens this game, Iowa State covers this spread real easy. You can't throw 4 interceptions in a game and expect to do that on a consistent basis and win games. So Iowa State, I'm really liking them here, and I'm guessing you're not going with Kendall on your fantasy team, Woj.
Definitely not. I'm taking Brock Purdy. Wall. Brock Purdy at 8,000. He's not the most expensive quarterback in the slate, but he's solid. We already talked about that. Went over the yards, and I'm going to match him up with Iowa State wide receiver too, Deshaunte Jones. He's only got 1 TD on the year, but he's scored his value in almost every single game he's played this year, if not, gone well over his value. He's got 37 catches and 46 targets, so he gets the ball quite a bit. And, we talked about in the mini episode, point per reception is huge. So I'm going to take Deshaunte Jones and then Brock Purdy. I'm going to combo that. Wall.
Hey, you're the expert, baby. In this Washington State game, I'm guessing you're going to have some wide receivers I'm sure you'll tell us about. But what I'm looking at in this game is another 1-point spread, Woj. 1-point spread. This is what we like, right?
I love those 1-point spreads. We talked about that last week too.
We did because we love when we see them, and it just makes us happy. It means it's going to be a close game. We're going to get to watch some football action, which is what we love, to be honest with you. But it's basically a pick 'em. The way the spread's moving on this game, up and down, Arizona State favored, Washington State favored. It's really going to be a pick 'em when it comes down to it, in my opinion. Over under sitting at 58, not real high, not real low. It's probably a Goldilocks number right there. But Arizona State, as I mentioned, they opened actually as the underdogs. The line's moving, steadily up, but it's unusual kind of for the public to be betting up a ranked team or an unranked team over a ranked team. Usually it works the other way around. So it's kind of an unusual line move. That'll probably lead me to stay away from this one, but it's going to be a real exciting game.
It is, Wall, and I'm going to go a little bit more into that over-under and that spread, too. It is a Washington State team that loves to spread the ball around and go crazy. Anthony Gordon's at 8,200. Here's the thing about Anthony Gordon and why he's at 8,200. If most of you don't know who Anthony Gordon is, he's the Washington State quarterback who has the most yards right now as far as passing and most touchdowns in college football. So you're asking, well, why isn't he more than Jalen Hurts? Why are all these other things? He's 8,200. He had a rough game against Utah, his last game out. I'm pretty sure this is why it's dropping his price. The guy's got over 2,000 yards, like we talked about, over 2,000 yards, 22 TDs. You remember that UCLA game, Wall? Holy crap, that was a game. He scored 60.9 points on DraftKings that week. I mean, I don't expect him to score 60 points this week, but I see a bounce back week happening from his poor performance against Utah, especially after coming off of a bye. And then going into why I think that over-under's at 58 and the point spread's where it's at is because of Arizona State and what they're going to do on offense. And I think their offense is going to be really huddled around Ninu Benjamin. He had a slow start to the season, but in the last 2 games, he's had 5 TDs. I think he could have a huge outing here. They're going to run the ball a little bit more. They're going to waste some clock. I think that's Arizona State's plan coming into this game. So if you want to throw out some dough for Reno Benjamin at running back at 7,500. I know it's a lot, especially with the high-profile quarterbacks that are out there, but I think he'll be worth it this year, especially against the Washington State team.
Well, Woj, I guess I was wrong. You didn't have any wide receivers in that game. Is it because Washington State spreads the ball out so much, I'm guessing?
Yeah, Gordon just throws the ball to about literally he just sees ants running out there and he just throws them, and he doesn't care who it is. It just throws it out there. They spread the ball way too much for me to pick a Washington State wide receiver, and they're valued way too high.
Makes sense from a strategy standpoint. I guess I will stay away from the wide receivers on Washington State, even though I think everyone in our fantasy league has at least one wide receiver on their team.
I kind of want to go over a couple games too, just in the afternoon slate. Is Texas Tech and Baylor, 3 p.m. The over-under is 58.5. Baylor's giving 11. John Lovett from Baylor, he's a running back. This would be the only guy you'd consider in this game, by the way. He's 5,000. So Texas Tech doesn't have much of a run D, and Baylor moves the ball well on the ground. Issue is they spread the ball around a lot. They have more of a running back by committee. It's not even a running back by committee. They just spread the ball around a lot in the running game, which is kind of odd. But 5 different players have at least 17 carries in their team. Lovett has carried it 42 times in the season, has 312 yards. And at 5,000, that kind of looks really good on paper. But again, they're probably going to be ahead in this game. I look them to kind of spread that wealth around. So that's a risky pick in my mind. Even in a tournament format, it's still a risky pick, even if he does kind of pop off, because he's not going to go 4 touchdowns deep and 200 yards in the game. So that's still a risky pick. As far as a value pick in a cash game, it's a possibility.
Yeah, I like it, Woj. How about my boys at Georgia Tech? I love to hammer the under on these guys. Do you see any value on the games, Georgia Tech at Duke? Any value in any of those players?
Kind of, yes. Jordan Mason from Georgia Tech, their running back, he's at 5,400. He's struggled the last few games, but has 57 carries in the year. They like to run it. They like to run the option as well. I like that as a value pick against a Duke team. A lot of people are overhyping Duke and their defense and all that, but I think Georgia Tech kind of runs that over. I do like Jordan Mason. As far as anybody else in this game, Quentin Harris, the quarterback for Duke, at 7,800. It's pretty expensive. So there was once a day, Wahl, back in the day, I used to bank on Duke quarterbacks. Being highly undervalued. Well, that day has gone by. This year they've been overvalued. Quentin Harris is way overpriced, I think. He is playing against a weak Georgia Tech team. Would be a risky tournament pick here, but a good tournament pick. I think people overlook Quentin Harris when they're picking people in tournament play, just because I think people forget Duke actually has another sports team other than basketball.
Well, that's probably part of the problem. Coach K would be happy to know that you respect their basketball program. But with as much as Georgia Tech holds the ball and milks the clock, I think any Duke player would be a tough player to take because they're not going to get that many opportunities. Again, Georgia Tech has that triple option, milk the clock. Duke's offense doesn't get on the field. It's probably one of the reasons you would avoid Harris, I would assume, too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we talked about that in the mini episode where, time of possession, we talked about Navy and how they kind of run a similar offense as Georgia Tech, where it doesn't matter who they play. You're just not going to get a lot of time to score. But, if you do want to take Quentin Harris, like I said, it'd be a risky tournament pick that might pan off because a lot of people usually don't like to take new quarterbacks.
Well, as far as wide receivers, I know you got to be taking somebody in the Bama game. I can almost bet you that.
Yes, my $6,000 wide receivers. I love them all. They're great. So Bama at Texas A&M, 2:30 on CBS, afternoon slate of games. Over under 61. Bama's giving 16. Let's talk about Devontae Smith. He's at 6,500. He's the cheapest of the three-headed monster over there, with Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy. Hopefully the guy that sets the pricing on DraftKings doesn't listen to our podcast, Wall, because you watch all the Alabama receivers next week, will all be like over 7,000. But 2 weeks ago, they had a bye last week. So 2 weeks ago, I had picked Devontae Smith, and we picked him up at 5,900, scored 71.4 points on DraftKings. And that was their last game. So he's not still getting that much love. I mean, Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy are good, and any 1-3 of those guys can pop off. When Devontae Smith did obviously pop off 2 weeks ago, but the guy's got 537 yards and 8 TDs, leads the Crimson Tide in both of those categories. So, again, I like Devontae Smith. I'm going to keep riding those, and I've said it. If they're at or around 6,000, I'm taking them. So, Devontae Smith, you're on my team this week again. The only other person in this game that I would probably consider taking would be Jasham Ashbourne from the wide receiver from A&M. He's 5,700. I like him at that price. I just don't like him in the matchup. That being said, he's the most targeted receiver in A&M. That's why I like him on the price. Let's take the Clemson game, for instance, where he pulled in 7, and the Auburn game where he pulled in 8. In the Auburn game, he scored over 20 points. So, again, I do like him. I just don't like him in this matchup. He hasn't been getting as many TDs or the yards to back it up with the targets, but I don't see him doing this against an Alabama secondary.
Hey, you're talking about him playing the number 1 team in the nation. That's not an easy task for anyone. And as far as the top 10 teams, we get a top 10 matchup with Florida and LSU this week, Woj. I want to talk about this game. This game is going to be a good one. 7 p.m. ESPN. It's on your night slate, so people can get some players if they want. But it's in Baton Rouge. Crowd's going to be going nuts. People are going to be going nuts. I mean, you got LSU sitting as a 12.5 point favorite, and over under a 55.5. There's going to be some defense in this game, but there might also be some scoring. It's what I like to call a something's got to give game, Woj. You know why I call it that?
Why, Wall?
It's pretty simple because both teams are undefeated. Someone's got to get a loss. Whoever wins this game, they're going to move up in the polls, and they're going to have some bragging rights. Let me tell you, LSU, undefeated, just crushing everyone. Average points for, 55. Average points against, 20. They didn't, we're going to put in quotes, dominate Texas, but that whole game, if you remember it, you could tell who was going to win that game. LSU was going to win that game. Texas played well, but LSU was the better team that night. Florida, also undefeated. Played 6 games already in as many weeks in the season. They played that first week, I guess, that was what do we call that? I don't even remember what we call it. I hate it. The week before the opening week.
The 0 week, week 0.
Week 0, well, you got it. That's what we call it. It's week stupid, in my opinion. Get rid of it. Play with the rest of the teams, in my opinion. But still, they've played 6 games as many weeks. They haven't really had a technical bye, so they've had a lot of competition. They're coming off a big win against Auburn last week, which I'm sure everyone who listens to the podcast saw. They beat Miami, Florida, who's questionable. Kentucky, pretty good team. Florida has a resume. I had this game pegged at 14. It opened around there, but a lot of money started coming in on Florida. A lot of money came in on Florida. So I'd have to lean towards LSU in this one, Woj. They're just crushing teams. I don't see Florida's a better team than they've played so far, other than maybe Texas, but I don't see them not crushing Florida, to be honest with you.
I'm with you, Walt. So I'm excited about this game too. But this is more of a blog game as far as fantasy, daily fantasy goes, because like you said, there's possibly going to be points scored, but it's just not going to be at the level I think LSU has been scoring. In Florida, hasn't really had to deal with this kind of defense yet. I don't know. So, Florida is one of those teams that no matter who they're playing, I just try to stay away from them in daily fantasy. Their D is good, and their offense is terrible, especially with Felipe Franks out. They have Kyle Trask in there, and he's possibly nursing a knee injury from last week against Auburn. Mullen said it was a dirty hit. He got his own tackle fell on him.
Well, that was so ridiculous. He kind of took back his words, but if you're a coach, you need to keep your mouth shut until you know what's going on. But yeah, he blamed Auburn for giving a dirty hit on his quarterback, and his own offensive lineman fell into him. It was quite ridiculous.
Hey, listen, I'm all for LSU too, and this new offense is crazy, and it's fun to watch. But if you want to drink the purple stuff, and think the new improved Tigers though will tear Florida a new one. Take Justin Jefferson at 7,000. He's the wide receiver for LSU. He's got 30 catches on the year, and he has a staggering, in those 30 catches, a staggering 547 yards and 7 TDs. It's a lot of yards for 30 carries. They get yards in chunks, and he knows what to do with the ball after he catches it well.
Woj, how about another one of those night games? Actually starts half an hour before the Florida LSU game. USC Notre Dame. I don't care what year it is, 2012, 2013, 2019. This is an exciting game, one fans like to watch. I know a lot of people out there hate Notre Dame, and they're going to be saying, oh, Notre Dame doesn't play anyone. That's what we always hear. But this is going to be an exciting game to watch. You're going to watch two good teams play each other. You got a spread. Might not be indicative of that. USC is getting 11 points, which is a lot for this series. Over-unders at 58. This spread came out at 11, and it's really just sat there. No one wants to take money on either side, really, or they're just getting half money on one side, half money on the other side, and the books don't care to move it.
It's going to be a little chilly there in South Bend. It's going to be sub 50 degrees at game time. It's going to be a culture shock for the USC players where they're coming from Los Angeles, and on Saturday in Los Angeles it's supposed to be 82 at game time.
Oof, that's pretty cold, Woj, and that's probably, people don't realize that, but that's probably why this over-under is sitting at 58 rather than 60, because of that exact fact you just mentioned. Other people might not realize it does have an impact on these over-under and point spreads. But this series in particular has just been dominated by the home team. Obviously, Notre Dame, it's in South Bend this year. They're the home team, but last year was really the only exception to this. USC team coming off, they beat Utah earlier this year. Other than that, they've not really been impressive to me. Have you watched a lot of their games, Woj? They play late at night sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, so they've had the issues at quarterback, Wahl, and we get that. It looks like, by the way, for fantasy people out there, and we're going to talk about it a little bit in daily here too, Keldon Solvis is going to be getting the start, so he's back. Matt Frick is out, Matt Fink is out. So here's my thoughts on this. So he's 6,200. He'd be a great option if you don't believe in Florida's D and you want to take Joe Burrow anyways, because Joe Burrow's expensive and Solvis is pretty cheap at 6,200, and to be honest, he's not a terrible quarterback, Wahl. But the thing about it is if he doesn't pop off right away or something happens, he's just coming off the IR. I don't see them having any issue putting Matt Fink back in right away, right away.
No, and you got to remember both these guys are replacing JT Daniels, right? Woju got injured at the beginning of the season. He's obviously out for the rest of the season. Yeah. So you're talking about two backup quarterbacks in itself. But no, I think either one of them can come in and play. I'm a little worried about this USC team though, because Washington beat them by 2 touchdowns the last game they played. USC's actually coming off a bye week. They didn't play last week, but the week before Washington beat them by 2 touchdowns. That if you're a USC football team, you don't want to lose to anyone by 2 touchdowns, especially a Washington team who's good but has been a little shaky. Notre Dame, they might as well have a bye week last week. They just bowled over Bowling Green. Excuse my pun, but they won 52-0. That's a big score. You mentioned a couple episodes ago, Woj, at least I believe you did, about how Notre Dame's got to come out and kill teams. That's what they did last week. And I'm thinking they're going to be trying to do the same thing to USC this week. Their average points for are 41, average points against 15. It's quite a disparity so far early in the season. Well, about halfway through the season. USC can't say the same thing. Their average points for 29, average points against 25. Those are some close games, and they're barely winning those close games. So Notre Dame has a big edge in this game, and that's definitely someone to be looking at this week.
Yeah, and so we talked about Solvis, and it's a decent option to take, especially if you pick up Joe Burrow, just because he's so cheap, he's starting. The plays per game in this, and USC's identity, by the way, is a high play per game offense. That's what they're looking for. That's what you're trying to go for. They just really haven't been able to do it without JT Daniels efficiently enough. Notre Dame's plays per game is at 62.4. That ranks them 124th in college football. Well, that's not good. That's just their identity. So I would try to stay away from as many people as possible in this game. Again, Solvis, we told you the reason why to pick him up if you don't believe in Florida's D. If you wanted a decently cheap running back, Tony Jones from Notre Dame is cheap. He's 55 attempts in the year, averaging 6.9 yards per carry. Um, they're not going to be playing a Georgia team that has a big, huge up front line, so they might be able to, blow by USC's line and slow the game down a little bit more, like they like to do. So he's not a bad option, especially at the 5,200 price point. Wahl, big game here. We got Penn State coming to Kinnick at Iowa at 6:30 p.m. on ABC. Well, what happens to teams when they come to Iowa at night?
They get eaten alive, Woj. You come to Iowa to get eaten alive in a night game. I mean, Kinnick going to be blowing up. You know those fans are going to be out there 5 a.m. starting to cheer on their Hawkeyes. They're playing a good team, though, Woj. Actually, Iowa's only getting 3.5 in this game, which does surprise me a little bit considering how good Penn State is. But, I mean, over-under on this game 41, it's going to be defensive-oriented. Penn State has been scoring points. So you may be wondering, hey, how do we have an over-under at 41 if Penn State has been put up, well, if I'll just run through it, 79 points, 45 points, 10 points in that close pick game for those of you that remember. But next game they came right out, put up 59, put up 35. And we have an over-under at 41. What's that all about? I'll tell you what it's about. You just mentioned it, Woj. They're coming to Iowa, coming to Kinnick to get eaten alive. That's what it's about.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. So I want to kind of go over some stats about the game real quick, Wall. So Penn State comes into this game at 69.2 plays per game. Iowa comes into this game at 68.2 plays per game. Penn State's at 457 yards per game. Iowa's at 424 yards per game, even after that dreadful of a game they played last week against Michigan.
Well, we don't need to mention that. It's going to make me angry the rest of the night.
Yeah, or puke, one of the two.
That's true.
Points allowed per game, 7.5 for Penn State. For Iowa, 8.8. And yards allowed, 264.2 yards a game for Penn State and 255 yards for Iowa. This game is so close on paper, Wall, it's absolutely disgusting. The only thing I could see different here that would be a widely different stat would be points scored per game, because Penn State just seems to be able to get in the end zone a lot more than the Hawkeyes do. Here's the thing as far as daily fantasy goes. I'm going to say 3 little phrases here. For 1 is yikes, 2 is run away, 3 is revert your eyes. You don't want to touch this game. We're at Iowa at night, New Jersey's good defenses. All I can see in my head is last week's 8 sacks against Nate Stanley, and we're coming to a Penn State team that leads the nation in sacks. So that's not good to look at. Penn State's offense isn't bad, but as soon as they see the famous pink locker room in Kinnick at night, that's a big gamble.
You know what, Woj? I think you bring up a good point when you mentioned how Penn State leads the nation in sacks, because this is really not going to be good for Iowa. They had awful. I know I said we weren't going to talk about it because it's making me mad, but I'm going to have to be mad the rest of the night. Last week, their offensive play calling was just horrendous. If they don't run the ball a little bit this week, I say, they're going to get eaten alive. I mean, they're going to get sacked on every play. Penn State is just going to bring the pressure. What does Madden used to say? Pin their ears behind their head. What was that phrase on the Madden game, Woj? You remember by chance?
I can't remember. I know what you're talking about. I can't pin it down though.
But that's exactly what it'll be, whatever it was. I think it was pin their ears behind their head or something. I don't know, ridiculous that Madden said, but it's going to be true in this instance, because Penn State is going to sack Iowa a number of times if they can't get a running game going of some sort, or at least throwing some running plays so that they're not coming with their ears pinned back.
Yeah, well, their offensive line just needs to get better. They need to be able to run the ball. You saw, and we talked about this last week, Wisconsin was able to run all over Michigan, manhandle their defensive front. And it seemed the reverse in the Michigan versus Iowa game. It looked like our offensive line hadn't played a Pee Wee football game, let alone a college level football game. So it comes down to being able to get Sargent some good carries, opening up the field if they want to have a chance at this game, especially at home under the Iowa faithful.
Hey, well, I respect Penn State. I I said myself in the beginning of this that I thought 3.5 was a little low for Iowa to beginning, but this is really going to be the first team that they play. This is an Iowa football team. They're good. This is the first time we have a chance to see Penn State, play someone real good. They played Pitt well, close game, but Pitt's not the kind of team Iowa is. They also played Buffalo from the MAC, who's a good team in my opinion, well, but we're not talking about an Iowa team, so we're going to see what Penn State's made of in this game.
For another side note, Wahl, on the night slate, we haven't really gone over too many quarterbacks that we could take. But Jamie Newman of Wake Forest at 7,800. I like this play way more than I like Joe Burrow, just because I respect the Florida defense. And even if Joe Burrow does get a couple of touchdowns, I don't think he makes his value. He has so far 33.08 average and is a consistent quarterback. He's hitting his value in games, and he's consistently right around 33, 40 points sometimes. He'll go down to like 28, but he doesn't dip too low and he doesn't go crazy high. He's just a really good, consistent quarterback. Would build your team around this guy, especially if you're going to do a 50-50 or any of the other cash games. Like, this is a guy to build your team around for sure.
Well, after listening to your mini-sode this week, I know that quarterbacks are very important to have, Woj. You got to have quarterbacks. Really, there's no super flex, right? Only 2 quarterbacks?
Just 2 quarterbacks. Super flex is a lie.
It's a lie. Well, take Jamie Newman. Woj has it for you. But what I'm more interested in from you, Woj, is what are you doing this week for the Woj and Wahl Pick'em?
Yeah, so last week didn't go so well for me. Went good for you. You had Cincinnati +4, and they got that. I had Iowa +3.5, and that just did not look good. We won't talk about that anymore. But this week, so while you're 4-2, I'm 2-4 going into this week. I'm taking Texas +12 because I feel like Texas. I feel like like what we talked about. The Cappers are kind of tunnel visioned on Jalen Hurts in Oklahoma, but Oklahoma's going to have a test here, and we've already seen Texas be able to at least stay in the game with LSU or near it, even though LSU looked like they were going to win that game nonetheless. But I think Texas is going to be able to stick with Oklahoma, if not just get it done entirely. We talked about that money line at +311. So I like Texas at +12.
That's a good pick in my opinion, as you and I kind of talked about a little bit. I'm liking that. It was at 10.5 before, and I saw it move to 12, and I was like, oh, man. But Woj already had that one, so I had to go somewhere else with my pick. We didn't really get a chance to talk about this game, but I'm taking Virginia +2.5. Miami's coming off a loss at home to Virginia Tech. Virginia's a better team in my opinion. This line really doesn't make sense to me. I don't know what the hell the handicappers are thinking, to be honest with you. N'Kosi Perry is starting for the injured Jaron Williams on Miami, so maybe they think that's going to bring a little hype to the Miami team, but I think Virginia is just a plain better team, and they're getting 2.5. So that's what I'm taking this week, Woj.
I'm hoping I get a win, Wall, because I sure as hell need one at 2-4, where you're at 4-2. So hopefully it's a better week for me this week.
Hey, I'm cheering for you, Woj. My boys, the Longhorns. Go Longhorns.
Thanks for listening, everyone. You can catch us on Twitter at WWCFB. Our Instagram's college_football_rundown. Our website, which you can get all our podcasts and information and contact me and Kyle on, is collegefootballrundown.com. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I'm Woj.
I'm Walt.
And this was the College Football Rundown. We're out.